Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Mronkola, and I will be presenting a metabolic syndrome among normal weight adolescents in Lagos, Nigeria, a cross-sectional study. By, okay. Metabolic syndrome is an agglomeration of symptoms which include dyslipidemia, abnormal blood glucose regulation, central or abdominal obesity, and hypertension. It is estimated that 25% of the world's population has metabolic syndrome, and there is an increasing incidence being observed among children and adolescents. The increasing incidence appears to be transcending geographical borders, with increasing prevalence among the low and middle income societies. It is also increasing among, previously it used to be thought to be a disease of the older people, but now it has been shown to be common among younger people too. And it is the increasing incidence of metabolic syndrome in less affluent countries has been attributed to increasing urbanization and lifestyle changes and subsequent obesity pandemic, especially among children and adolescents. Obesity is intricately linked to the incidence of metabolic syndrome, and so may seem highly unlikely in normal weight individuals. However, studies have shown that this is not true, and there is actually a higher risk of death among normal weight individuals. As such, a review of this condition is necessary to mitigate the morbidity and the mortality. Central obesity is essential for the diagnosis of metabolic syndrome, but this is not captured in the definition of the body mass index. Therefore, it underscores the possibility of metabolic syndrome in those that apparently have a normal weight. Hence, weight circumference as a measure of central obesity is more clinically relevant than BMI when screening for metabolic syndrome. It is known to be metabolic syndrome is known to be the driver of the twin global epidemics of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And therefore, in adolescents, the longer exposure to these cardiometabolic risk factors predisposes them to an early age of presenting with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular risk. We have few studies amongst adolescents and Africans generally. Okay, so the aim of the study was to determine the prevalence of metabolic syndrome in normal weight adolescents in secondary schools. It was a cross-sectional study, and adolescents in secondary schools, private and public schools were recruited using multi-stage sampling technique, and a total of 259 normal weight adolescents attending secondary schools were recruited. For the results, okay, so the results show that almost all we had more more male participants than females, and the mean age of participants was 13.6 plus or minus 2 to 3 years. Most of the participants were from the middle and low socioeconomic class. The prevalence of metabolic syndrome was 2.7%. The cardiometabolic syndrome that was the highest ones were central obesity, which had 7.7%, and elevated blood pressure, which was 7.3%. There was no association between age, gender, and socioeconomic class and metabolic syndrome. And then the participants who reported a family history of hypertension had a significantly higher prevalence of metabolic syndrome than those that did not have a family history. And almost half of the participants also had a history of diabetes. The dietary pattern so participants who repeated eating more than 3 times a day had the highest prevalence of metabolic syndrome, though it didn't have a statistically significant relationship. And then there was no significant relationship between what they ate, that's their pastries, candies, biscuits, with the occurrence of metabolic syndrome. Physical activity significantly affected metabolic syndrome. So those who were walking to school or from school and who participated in school sports had a lower prevalence of metabolic syndrome. Okay, so by discussion, so we had a prevalence rate of 2.7%, and this was lower than previous studies. As I had said, many studies had not been done among children and adolescents. So in northwestern Nigeria, there was a prevalence of 35.1%, but this can be explained because of the older population. And then amongst adolescents, there had been a study amongst those that were obese and overweight, and had a prevalence of 14.3%. However, again, this was among those that were already obese or overweight. Despite the normal weight status of participants, in this study, 7.7% had central obesity, which is similar to what was noted in the United States, where 9.2% of those who appeared normal also had abdominal obesity. In conclusion, it highlights the presence of metabolic syndrome even among apparently healthy, normal weight individuals, and a family history of hypertension or diabetes and physical inactivity was significantly associated with metabolic syndrome in study participants. Thank you.